Welcome to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne, and I am thrilled to share with you information about resiliency, well-being, performance, education, business, parenting, and everything in between. I'm committed to joining you each week to talk about these big ideas and bring them into action, habits, tools, strategies, tactics that allow us to finally uncover what it takes to truly be well. And I'm just so excited that you're here. Welcome to another episode of Resiliency Redefined. I think all I can say is get ready to lock in. On today's episode, we have the one and only Alan Stein Jr. Now, I reference Alan Stein Jr. often when I say things like, this is important. I'm going to tell you twice. I'm going to say it again. This is all Alan Stein Jr. He brings the energy, the insight, the idea of utility. How do we ensure that we are living aligned so that way we can be in our kind of zone of greatness? Now, what's so cool about this conversation, we started talking about business, all the things, but it shifted to parenting and raising teenagers. It was such an unexpected pivot where all of a sudden we see how the principles of excellence and high performance can also come to us as parents and supporters and guardians. So friends, if you know anything about Alan Stein Jr., he's going to bring the energy. He absolutely delivered on this episode. So buckle up and let's lock in for this episode of Resiliency Redefined with the one and only Alan Stein Jr. Now, we are in for a treat. And I know I sometimes say we're in for a treat, but this is a really big deal. For me, I'm excited to welcome Alan Stein Jr. to the podcast. Welcome, Alan. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here as well. This is a treat for me, so let's have a fun conversation for sure.
I'm in. Okay, so Alan, for friends who don't know you, first of all, when I reference, hey, Alan Stein Jr. in the podcast, this is the guy. This is the person. I will say things, for example, Alan, like, this is important, so I'm going to say it twice. And I always say, this is important, I'm going to say it twice, just like Alan Stein Jr. Like, people always laugh at me. They're like, we know it's Alan, Robyne. I'm like, I know, but I just want you to know I'm crediting my sources. But Alan, for folks who haven't met you or connected with your work yet, could you just tell us a wee bit about who you are and some of the good work that you're up to these days?
Be happy to. So on the personal side, I'm an amicably divorced, almost 50-year-old father of 3 teenage children.
Perfect.
I've got 15-year-old twin boys who are in 10th grade and a 13-year-old daughter who's in 8th. And I live just north of Washington, D.C. in the suburbs of Maryland, which happens to be also where I grew up. So for the exception of going to college for 4.5 years, I've pretty much been in this same spot for 50 years. And that's the personal side. Yeah. On the professional side, I've had 2 separate careers, but they kind of blend together, and there's a red thread that ties them together. I spent the first 20 years of my professional career working as a basketball performance coach, primarily working at the middle school and high school age, because that was the age where I felt I could have the biggest impact on their lives off of the court. And then in 2017, I transferred over to doing more corporate keynote speaking and working more with peers. But I still very much consider myself a performance coach and a coach at heart. I just now teach folks, in the boardroom, how to apply the same things that I used to teach in the locker room. And then the cool part is all of these things also work in the living room. So the principles that I like to preach and teach on stage and on page are dear to my heart because they have such high utility and they really apply to every facet of us as human beings. So that's kind of who I am. And I'm very grateful to do what I do. And I love what I do.
Oh my gosh, Alan, thank you for that. And you are so humble. Folks, go onto his website. You're going to see, hey, he's worked with groups like, oh my gosh, like Starbucks, Jordan, like American Express. Like you are working with some of the biggest organizations in the groups around the world. And then just below that, you're going to see Alan's picture with like Kobe Bryant, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. Like you're a legend in our house, Alan. And again, and beyond, not just at our place, but and beyond. The work that you do and what I absolutely love is that keyword that you said is around utility. It's like we make this work and we know it works. And you have so many reps of seeing it work, knowing that these are the things that make a difference in terms of high performance. So, okay, everyone, I'm very excited. I'm sure you can tell that I get to have a conversation with this person. So Alan, right now, when the world feels so unwell, Like right now, like it's like almost like, are we talking about high performance? Because people are like barely coping. One of the things that I find so amazing about your work, and again, you cover this in your books, is the fact that the principles of high performance aren't reserved just for elite athletes.
Mm-mm.
Like the core principles of what it takes to be excellent, to be able to achieve greatness, these are things that any one of us, if we show up, we dedicate ourselves to, we practice a wee bit of that discipline, like Alan, we can do this. So help us understand what are some of those things that everyday people can do so we can unlock some of these amazing things that you talk about so beautifully in so many different places and spaces.
What a beautiful place to start. But before I dive into that, I do want to make a very honest disclaimer, and that is really everything that I share, everything I write about, everything I talk about. I'm not coming from a place of mastery. This is stuff that still trips me up and I still have difficulty with and I'm still working on. But even to take it a step further, I know you and I have only gotten acquainted over the last few years, but had you known me 15, 20 years ago, I was the polar opposite of almost everything I preach and teach. I mean, I'm big on extreme ownership and not blaming, complaining, and making excuses. If you knew the 20 and 30-year-old version of me, I was the king of making excuses, the king of blaming other people when things didn't go my way. I talk a lot about, focusing on what you have control over and learning to let go of the things that you don't. Well, I had that in the inverse in my younger
Yeah.
days. I was always consumed with things outside of my control. So the
Mhm.
reason I share that is, I've lived a very fortunate life and I've had
Yeah.
some wonderful people and some wonderful experiences, but really to a T, everything I preach and teach, I've done the opposite of. And
Mhm.
that's what gives me so much compassion
Yeah.
when working with others. There's never an ounce of judgment,
Mhm.
even with my own children. Like I try to model for them, not blaming, complaining, or making excuses. But when they do, I lean in with compassion and empathy. I don't scold them.
Yeah.
I try and show them a better way because when I was their age, I did the same thing. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the disclaimer I like to make at the beginning because I don't want anyone to think that I have all of this stuff figured out. Now, what I
I
can
love it.
say with a huge smile and a tremendous amount of pride is I'm way further ahead today than I've been at any other point in my life. And I'm very pleased with the direction that I'm going. I'm certainly not at the apex of the mountain yet, but I'm climbing it every day and I'm going in the right direction. And really, that gives me a tremendous amount of peace. And then
Yeah.
one other point that I want to make is speaking of utility, not only do these principles lead towards more productivity and higher performance, but I'm learning now as I'm almost 50 years old, they're the exact same principles that lead to fulfillment,
Yeah.
that lead to joy, that lead to a sense of inner peace, that lead to a sense of I am actually enough and I don't need to accomplish or do anything in order to earn other people's, affection and love. I'm enough as is. So these principles, certainly, if you're looking at them through the lens of high performance, can be very valuable. But if you're just looking to hopefully improve, as you just said, in a very unwell world,
Yeah.
these things will really apply and help you out as well.
Yeah. And Alan, I think that's why you have like such enormous amount of like credibility as somebody to offer some insight into this because you are so honest in your writing. Like you are so honest in the fact that like, hey, I'm still a student. I'm still figuring this out. And your curiosity and your commitment to like keep showing up and learning and improving. Like, yes, it's like set your career trajectory in the right direction, which is so cool to see, but it also just gives that kind of that again that credibility, that credence to be like this is a guy who gets it. Like this is somebody who absolutely get it. It's not like, you're just born into greatness and you won the genetic lottery and everything just has been kind of unfolded for you. Like Alan's worked at this. Like you have been a student of the craft of everything that you do. And again, that's why I'm so excited to talk about some of these principles. So Alan, where do we even start? What are some of the principles? What should we be thinking about? What should we be talking about?
Well, let's even just start with kind of the pen that you just placed right there.
Yeah.
Whoever's watching or listening to this, do the best you can to not judge yourself or to be self critical about wherever you are on the journey, because we don't want to play the comparison game.
Yeah.
If you happen to be further ahead than I am right now, that's wonderful. If you happen to be further behind than I was 20 years ago, that's okay too. Try to remove the label of judgment and criticism and just know that wherever you are right now is your starting point and that
Yes.
you can make the conscious choice to slowly but surely move forward and progress and learn to let go of these labels and trying to play the comparison game. I think that's a great place to start. And really, when I think of some of the traits that do have the highest utility, one of them is one that I'm constantly working on, but I talk about with my children all the time, and that's the ability to regulate your emotions. It's your ability to kind of take the temperature of the world around you, acknowledge how you're feeling, understand why you're feeling the way that you're feeling, but then most importantly, don't let it dictate your behavior. The line I use with my kids all the time, and I was actually just working with a college basketball program up in New York and said, hey, every emotion is okay.
Yeah.
Every behavior is not. And we have to learn how to separate the two. I never in my life now do the best I can to never resist or suppress or ignore my emotions, even when I'm feeling the unpleasant ones.
Yes.
Like, it's not my preference to be angry or jealous or frustrated or irritated. But we have those emotions for a reason, and I allow myself to feel them. And then I try and dig deeper and figure out why I'm feeling that way. But then I'm incredibly cautious to make sure that I'm not treating others based on how I'm feeling, that I'm not being rude or disrespectful or diminishing someone else just because I'm in a low mood. So for me, I try to live up my core values and my standards regardless of how I feel. And most people that know me, at least know me superficially, think I'm always happy, always positive, always optimistic. And while some of that is in my wiring, and I would acknowledge that I probably skew a little more on that end of the spectrum, that's not me 24/7. Those that really know me know I am one moody son of a gun, that I have my low moments, that I get just as frustrated and irritated as the next person. But I'm very proud of the fact that I very, very, very rarely allow my behavior to be dictated by that. And I had heard a mental performance coach years ago say that our emotions are designed to inform us. They're not designed to direct us.
Right.
And that just hit me like a bolt of lightning. And that's really a creed that I try to live by. But I think that's kind of an epicenter that we can start. And, with picking these traits that, are the most powerful, it's also like asking me which three of my children I love the most. Technically, it's supposed to be a three-way tie. Most of the times it's my daughter because my knucklehead sons give me fits. But generally speaking, I love all three of them. And
Absolutely.
it's just like emotional regulation is one spoke off of the wheel that I think is a good starting point.
Yeah.
But it's not the only one.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely appreciate that. And again, just to pull that thread that we often talk about that again, it's information that it's not directives, right? So, it's like, and I often talk even with my own kids about and some of the athletes that I work with, it's like, nobody really feels like doing this all the time, right? Like very few people are just like, yes, I want to grind. I want to get up early. I want to say no to those social events so I can commit to what I'm trying to do right now or in this season. Like nobody wants to feel like that or do it all the times. And we don't let the feeling being the decision maker, right? We acknowledge the feeling, as you said, we recognize maybe where is it coming from? We try to see it, spot it, name it, action it, but we don't let that decide whether or not we are going to show up in a respectful way, or let that decide whether or not we're going to do our workout today or what that might look like.
What it reminds me of, in the context I put it in, is the difference between motivation and discipline. And I happen to think that generally speaking, most people over-index and over-prioritize motivation when that's a slippery slope, because I believe motivation is just a feeling. It's no different than feeling happy or joy or sad or frustration. And like any of those feelings, it doesn't last forever. Once again, on the continuum of humans walking the planet, I probably skew towards being a little more motivated than others most of the time, but I'm not motivated 24/7. So I can't rely on motivation to be the determining factor on whether or not I show up. Now, discipline, on the other hand, discipline is an actual decision. Discipline is a choice that you make in the moment. And the way that I define discipline is making a choice in the moment that most aligns with the person you're trying to become, or most aligns with the goal that you're trying to achieve. So as I just mentioned, I was just working with the women's basketball program at Columbia University up in New York. And that was the context that I put for them. They're trying to win an Ivy League championship this year. And I said, so in just the frame of that, discipline means that you make decisions that are most in alignment with becoming a champion. And that goes from what you're going to eat for breakfast to who you follow on Instagram to whether or not you eke out those last 2 reps on a bench press. Those decisions, you want to make a more disciplined decision more often than not. And yet at the same time, you want to give yourself the grace and space to be less than perfect, because no one makes disciplined decisions 100% of the time. The goal is to make them more frequently and progressively more often. And once again, most people look at me and go, Alan, you're just so disciplined. I could never get up early and work out. I could never do. And I'm like, I don't feel like doing any of that either most
Yes.
of the time. But
Yeah.
discipline is a muscle that you can build over time. And discipline is not something that's preset. It's not in our genetic code.
Yeah.
So when people say, I'm not disciplined, I just remind them that's a story that you're telling yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And historically, you may have plenty of evidence of when you've chosen to make undisciplined decisions, but you can change that with your very next decision. The very next decision you have to make, you have an opportunity to choose the more disciplined route. And when you start doing that more frequently, then you'll start to identify as someone who is a disciplined person. So if someone asks me if I'm disciplined, I answer with an affirmative immediately, because I tend to make mostly disciplined decisions in my life, but every single time it's a choice.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh, on so many levels, I love that. And to add kind of evidence to what you're describing, when we look at the role of that emotion of motivation, it actually behaves very similar to the other kind of primary emotions, and we know it lingers for about 90 seconds.
Yes.
So it's like 90 seconds, right? So unless you literally have the shoes tied up or you have whatever that thing is to make it so that you can then execute within those 90 seconds, as soon as that 90 seconds starts to dissipate, now you're going to have to rely on behavioral patterns, which is where that discipline piece comes in. And so often, especially when I'm working with folks who've gone through like a really difficult change season or uncertainty, and they just don't even kind of know where to start with it, sometimes I really encourage them, Alan, just to think like, what would like a healthy version of you do? Right? You don't feel
Yep.
healthy right now. You don't feel maybe motivated right now, but what would a healthy version of you choose to do right now? And they're like, well, the healthiest version of me would probably not doom scroll all night. I would actually get some sleep. I would wake up early in the morning. That's what a healthy me would do. I'm like, okay. And it's not like fake it till you make it, which I think is such a disservice. It's like unlearning and reacquainting yourself with your possibility, with your capacity for discipline. And as you said, the stories we tell ourselves.
Absolutely. I love that. And the frame I use, there's two different that I use. And the first is, I'm pretty crystal clear on the man that I want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years. I even have the optimistic delusion to think I've got another 50 years on the planet. Like when I
Yes.
turn 50 in January, I actually think I'm only at halftime.
I
And
love
my
it.
goal is to make my next 50 my best 50, and
Yeah.
to take all of these lessons that I've learned the hard way through the first 50 and apply the lesson moving forward. But for me, the frame is, whichever one of those timelines I choose to use, I try to make a decision that is most in alignment with becoming that person. So I want the 55 or 60 or 75 or 100-year-old Alan to be physically, mentally, and emotionally fit. I want him to have a strong connection with the people that he loves and cares about. I want that future version of me to be doing work that he considers meaningful and in service of other people. So that's not getting too granular, but those are kind of the big rocks of who I aim to be. Well, now in the present, I just try to make as many decisions as I can to line up with that guy. Once again, from what I choose to eat, to whether or not I work out, to what I read, to who I hang out with, to the things I say yes to being present with my children, like all of those things. And so what ends up happening is I'm planting seeds in the present to become that person in the future. But the beautiful part is I'm not delaying or postponing anything. I'm reaping the benefits in the present moment. Like I'm eating the healthy meal today and reaping that benefit. But I'm also planting a seed that if I come back on your show in 5 or 10 years, I don't want any of your listeners or viewers to be surprised if all of those things have come to fruition, because I'm designing my future in the present by the decisions that I make. And the last frame that I use, and this one's a little cheesy. I
Oh, I
heard this
love
when
it.
I was really younger, but I love it.
Yeah.
Every night before I go to bed, I kind of say to myself, Alan, you just traded 24 hours of your life for the progress that you made today. Are you happy with that trade? And if I'm happy for trading some of my life, which I'll never get back, trading some of my life for what I got out of today, then it was a good day. And I can rest my head on my pillow and get sound sleep. And in the rare occasion, and it still happens, that my answer is no. Today was not my best day. I did not show up as my best self. And I not only did I not make progress, I think I took a step backwards today as a father, as a
Yeah.
speaker, as a business owner, whatever. I give myself the grace and space to be less than perfect. And I know that, I'm going to have a do over tomorrow. So I still get a good night's sleep because
Yes.
I try not to hang up on the fact that today wasn't perfect. And if most nights I can go to bed saying I inched forward towards becoming that person, then it was a win, regardless of any external circumstances, regardless of how a speaking engagement went,
Yep.
whether or not I even got the deal, whether someone
Yeah.
buys my books, whether my kids talk back to me, regardless of any of those things. If I felt like I made some progress, then that day was a win. And I'm in control of that. The external world does not control whether or not I win my day. I've got the keys to the car and I will never give them away.
Yeah. Alan, I'm just so inspired because I'm sure people are listening to this being like, F yeah, Alan, like, yes, like yes, 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 all of it. And I've seen you in action. Like I've seen you at at an event in New York and you're bringing your pretty packaged lunches, right? Like you are not leaving your well-being at the hands of, hopefully I'll find something healthy that I can eat. Like you're
Right.
pulling out your Tupperwares, like you're pulling out your containers. You're standing up in a room and walking around because you're not going to sit there for
Yeah.
an hour and let your body get stiff. Like you practice this. And again, I love that you teach it, you preach it as you say, but you also like you are all in. Like this isn't just like
Thank you.
sometimes or in front of certain people or places or spaces I'm going to do this. Like Alan, like you fully embrace and are behind these practices and these principles, which is just amazing. So the question I'm really curious, as a fellow with teenagers,
Yep.
okay, so we both come in high energy, performance focused, and the reality is the kind of ecosystem that our young people are growing up in isn't necessarily set up for health performance in terms of even just like social media, in terms of just how they structure their day. And I can even share with you, I recall it was so interesting. Hunter comes home after his first year at university, Alan, and he said to me something that like I appreciate, like, please listen to the whole story before you judge. But he came home and he said to me, how was your first lecture? And, his first week of school away at university. And I said, what was it like? And he goes, Mom, it's really actually not hard to be extraordinary right now. And I'm like, pardon? And he said, like, nobody was paying attention. People weren't making eye contact with the professor. Like, people didn't introduce each other, like themselves to other people. And he said, I walked into one of my classes. I introduced myself to the prof. I said hello to the couple of people sitting in the front. And he's just like, and they were all looking at me as if I had these like super skills, like that I have somehow. And he's like, Mom, it's basic courtesy. Like, literally, it is not hard to be excellent right now. And I thought it was such an interesting perspective, but also like a wee bit of a sad kind of state of affairs if the fact that like just basic social skills are perceived as a superpower, because I think we all have these, we should be using our social skills. But again, if right now there's this kind of like almost like this apathy for our young ones, right? Like where again, we hear these ridiculous amounts of time on technology, right? That they're feeling disengaged, that they're, just really this kind of lost, rudderless group. Where do we start as parents, supporters, guardians, coaches to like almost it feels like kind of like wake them up to be like, dude, like you are in a really good season. You are injury free. You have all of these opportunities. Like, show up. How do we get them fired up about life right now, Alan?
I wish that I had the answer for you. I can speculate and I can share a few things that I'm trying to do. But to be honest, that is one of my struggles as a parent.
Yeah.
Because I love my three children more than anything, and as much as anyone watching or listening loves
Yep.
their children, and that's still something that I struggle with.
Yeah.
My kids don't always feel as motivated and as inspired and ready to do these things as sometimes I would hope.
Yeah.
But I do the best I can to take a step back. And for me as a parent, number one is obviously we love our children unconditionally, but it's not just that's not good enough. We actually have to communicate that to them and to show them. Because while I know that every parent does love their child unconditionally, many times as parents, our behavior undermines that because we tend to only show them that we're pleased when they're performing, when they're getting good grades, when they're scoring goals, when they're scoring points, when they're doing those things. And children can interpret that very differently. They can interpret that as, well, my dad's happy and loves me when I do well, and he's not when I don't, which by definition would mean that in their eyes, I don't love them unconditionally. So I do everything I can to detach from results and performance-based praising with my children and keep it all about the process. And, I don't have a lot of rules with my children. For me, my own parenting philosophy is very hands-off. I give my kids a tremendous amount of autonomy to make their own decisions, but they know that they have to pay the consequences for their decisions. Like, if you're going to be allowed to have freedom of choice, you are not free from the consequences, and that's on you. So if it's really cold here and you don't want to wear a jacket, don't wear a jacket. I don't care, but you're going to be cold later. And when you're cold later, that will be the consequence of having not brought a jacket. If you don't want to eat breakfast, don't eat breakfast. Go ahead and see how you're feeling in about 3 hours when you're hungry and you can't focus and you're low on energy and you're a little bit irritable. So I don't make my kids do anything. I encourage them to do certain things. I do the best I can to plant seeds, and then I model that behavior. You've already announced to the world I'm a little finicky with what I eat. And, for me, I don't make my kids do that. If my kids want to order something unhealthy, they have the right to do that. Now, what I've noticed, and I'm so just grateful for, I've been planting these seeds and modeling this behavior long enough that I'm starting to now reap the benefits of seeing my kids make many of these decisions. And the beautiful part is it's never because I tell them to, it's because they're slowly choosing to do that. So that modeling, I think, is really important. But I think everyone has to figure out their own parenting style and what works best. And even with my 3 children, 2 of which literally share the DNA of being twins, I have very different parenting styles with each of them, very different ways that I communicate. My one son, Jack, is a spitting image of me when I was that age. And I've already let you guys know when I was that age, I was kind of a knucklehead, and I'm getting some of that from him. My son, Luke, is very different. So I can parent him slightly differently. So I don't believe it's a one size fits all. But I also think we need to have massive empathy and compassion, that it's very easy to step back as a parent and go, come on, get off of your phone, go outside and play. And 2 things. One, most of the time parents say that, they have to put down their phone in order to yell at their child for staring at their phone. So you're modeling the behavior that your children are emulating, and then you're getting upset at them for emulating it. The other is, I can acknowledge that when I was 15 years old, if I had access to social media and internet, I would have been just as consumed by it as they are. So it's not like there's anything wrong with them. I think today is the hardest time in human history to be. But then by default, I actually think it's also the hardest time to be a parent, because they're going through uncharted waters, and we are as well. So we have to have some patience, and we have to be honest. With my kids, they were just starting the school year here a couple weeks ago, and I had the annual sex and drugs and drinking and bullying talk with them. And one thing I've learned as a parent, I've kind of made this an annual formal discussion, which is okay. It gets them to pay attention. But what I'm realizing is it's kind of like businesses that only do a year-end employee review. Like, I need to be talking about these things with my kids more often. And that's, as a parent, that's somewhere where I have to be better. I need to be bringing these things up and talking about them every week, every month, not making this annual come to Jesus one time big PowerPoint presentation on why you shouldn't do drugs types thing. But even with that conversation, like, I choose to be very honest with my kids, and I don't just tell them the downsides of those things. I also let them know why people do them. And people do them because it can feel good, and because it can be an escape, and because, so I don't just tell them the bad. I try to give them a holistic a view, but I let them know that when it comes to some of these things, that you can make a decision in the moment that could undermine everything it is that you want in life. It could change your life forever. And that is a hefty responsibility. So I'm hoping that my parenting style is teaching my kids to make good decisions consistently on the little things, so that when the big things present themselves, they'll have flexed that muscle and they'll be better apt to make a better decision. But I've also let them know, if and when you mess up, and if and when you make a horrific decision, I still love you. I
Yeah.
still have your back, and we will figure out a way forward. So you'll never be on an island by yourself, no matter what you do. But you know what's right, you know what's wrong, you know what's good for you, you know what's not. I just want to encourage you to make the best decisions that you can. And
Yeah.
that
Sounds
I
good.
won't know if any of this is working till my
Yeah.
kids are in their 30s and they can look back and say, "Hey, Dad, you did a pretty good job," or
Yeah.
"Hey, Dad, you really messed this one up." So the
Yeah.
jury's still out.
There you go. I love that, Alan. And again, I just appreciate just your candor of the idea of not making it results driven, being open to knowing them, like allowing them that spaciousness to be able to use personal agency. Because at the end of the day, this isn't a matter of like, being a kind of a rescuer or a supporter for our kids. It's like, so they can make the decisions when we're not there, right?
Yeah,
Like when they're super little, we have to make those decisions. But the idea is they're going out into this big world and we want to know that they're able to think on their feet. We want to know that they're able to like understand consequences and again, understand the pressures and the pieces of information that they're getting. And again, we're raising critical thinkers. That's what this is all about. And it reminds me of years ago. I remember hearing a piece of advice that was so transformative as a sports parent because both my boys are ballers, and Ava was in gymnastics and cheer. And I remember this parent group, like this parent made this reference, and I wish I would know their name because I would drop their name every single time because I do love to drop my sources. But they said when your child finishes whatever activity, right? Whether it's like house league, doesn't matter if it's a school sport, varsity, D1, doesn't matter. Your job as a parent is to say, I love watching you do your thing.
absolutely.
It has nothing to do with outcome. It has nothing to do with like, hey, bad reffing is part of the sport too, right? Like, terrible coaching is part of it, right? Like this has not like this is not your place or space to say that. And I recall like ever since the kids were little, they'd come off the court and they would, some of these kids would run to their parent and the parents would have their stat sheets or the parents would be like this or that. And I would look at my boys and I'd just be like, I love watching you play basketball. Like, and that's all I'm going to ever give you on that front because the me being here is as your supporter, it's as your biggest cheerleader. And you can tell me all the things about how that game went from your perspective. And I'm just going to keep telling you that I love watching you play sports. I love
That's so
watching you do your
beautiful.
thing. And again, I feel like that's what a lot of parenting is about is we go from educator to almost like a mentor
Yeah,
of being like, hey, let me show you, let me give you some ideas. And then I'm also a safe place to land
right.
when you drop the ball or when there's a fumble or when things they don't go your way.
Absolutely. Well, and I believe the parents that do it the other way are well intentioned, but they're just somewhat misaligned and misinformed.
Yeah.
If you were to go ask 100 parents right now, what do you want for your children when they're older? Most of them would answer to some version of, well, I just want them to be happy. And for me personally, that's a little bit incomplete because I also tend to look at happiness as a feeling. And I don't know that it's realistic to say, well, I just want a kid that's always happy because
Yeah.
that ain't ever going to happen. That's not
Yeah.
real. So for me, it might be some more nuance. I want a child that's resilient and is fulfilled.
Yeah.
To me would be a better answer, but that's just playing verbal semantics. But if most people say, I just want my kid to be happy, and then what they turn around and do is they micromanage and nitpick over grades, over how many goals you scored, like what college are you going to. Like they're emphasizing all of the things that, in their own words, would have nothing to do with whether or not someone was happy, unless in their mind that's what leads to happiness is you have to get straight A's, you have to be the best basketball player, you have to go to the best college. And
Yeah.
if that's what you think determines happiness, then we probably need to have a more in-depth
That's right.
discussion.
Yeah.
But for me, it's all about just equipping my children with what I believe the most important traits they'll need to become fully functioning, resilient
Yeah.
contributors to this world as they move forward. And none of that is dependent on how many points they score or what grades they get. So that's where, and I think the problem lies is
Yeah.
everyone says they want this, but what they talk about, what they praise, and what they give consequences for is not in alignment with that. So to me, alignment is one of the most powerful words and concepts.
Yeah.
Make sure everything that we're doing with our children points in the direction of what you want for them. And for me, with my kids, I don't really parent them as the kids they are now. I'm trying to parent them as the adults that I hope they grow to be.
Yes.
And I can say this, again, in the spirit of vulnerability, I love my parents very much, and I know that they did the best they could with me with the tools that they had.
Yeah.
But respectfully, there were four things in our household that were never talked about. We never talked about religion. We never talked about politics. We never talked about sex, and we never talked about like drugs and drinking. Like really, all of those things, it was just out of sight, out of mind. And when I look at historically the issues that have given me the biggest heartache and I've made the biggest missteps in my life, it's all of those four things.
Yeah.
And it just happens to be the things that we never talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to break that cycle with my children and make sure we're talking about those things. And you better believe, even when I have this big annual summit at the beginning of the school year,
Love it.
it is just as uncomfortable and awkward for me as it
Yeah.
is for them. But what I told them this last time was, I love you enough to have awkward, uncomfortable
Yes.
conversations. And I love you enough. All I want you to know from this conversation is that I love you enough to try to do the best I can to share these ideas. And that's all we can do.
Yeah.
And from a parenting standpoint, like I said at the very beginning, I'm still trying to figure all of this out. I'm doing some things fairly well, other things maybe not as well, but I'm hoping I'm getting better. And then I've forgiven myself for the things over the last several years that I know that I could have and should have done a better job with.
Yeah.
So that's it.
That's it. Alan, oh my goodness. I love how, again, with such candor and it's just such clarity, right? And again, you were talking about like as parents, we want to make sure our message is aligned. Also, that ties back to what you said at the top of the top of the show about like ensuring that our choices today are aligned with
Yeah.
what we want to be in terms of what our goals are personally or professionally and what it looks like a year from now, 3 years, 5 years, 9 years, wherever we get to go, or,
Yeah.
or Al as a centurion, right? Like, I love this. Okay. So I'm mindful of our time. And again, gosh, I hope we have like episode 2, 3, 4, and 5. Like, I want to build more of these conversations as I appreciate it. And there's one little thing that I do when I end the podcast is I usually let people will leave a question for the guest.
Oh, cool.
And I have to share with you though, the boys knew that you were going to be the guest today. And there were 2 questions. And Hunter's like, I wonder if she's going to pick my question or my brother's. Of course, we can't pick favorites. So is it okay if I ask you 2 just kind of random questions from the boys?
I'll be happy to answer both. Yes.
Okay. So Jackson's question. So again, our house is such big sports fans. Jackson's question is do you have like a favorite sports like movie or a sports like what's your kind of go-to if you had to pick like this is the one that just fired you up or gets you excited, if you have a movie that's your favorite sports movie?
I've got a Mount Rushmore of them, and if I had to pick the singular one, it would be Rocky, the the,
Oh,
the
there you
boxing
go.
the boxing movies. I mean, Rocky One came out in 1976, which is the year I was born.
Yeah.
So I didn't really start getting into it till Rocky Three, which I believe was early '80s. So I
It
was still
was.
8, 9 years old, and then absolutely fell in love with Sylvester Stallone. But
Yes.
that character of Rocky and being an underdog, if I could round out the podium,
Yeah.
Hoosiers, the movie Rudy,
Yes.
Karate Kid is another one that came out when I was 8 years old. I love those movies and
Yeah.
still watch them to this day. And to be honest, yeah, they're a little bit cheesy and hokey, but generally speaking, they still hold up. And even
Totally.
my kids have fun watching some of them with me. So yeah, I'll go with Rocky 3 is my all-time favorite.
Okay, well, I am just like, this is why we're destined to be friends because mine is Rocky 4,
Okay.
and the puppy who's sound asleep here is Apollo. Our house is deeply versed in the Rocky era, so I love that response. Jax will be super excited to hear that, and it's interesting. So he loves all of the Rockies as well. Rudy's a top one for him,
Yep.
and another one interesting. I love how you said like this movie came out when you were like Karate Kid came out when you were 8.
Yeah.
So for him, it's McFarlane. So the
Oh,
McFarlane, that was the one where again, he was a little guy watching
yeah.
that and the Kevin Costner great movie about cross country running. But yeah, and of course Rudy is just permeates our family.
Yes.
Okay, so that was thank you for answering that. Now Hunter's question, I thought this was fascinating. He asked me this we were chatting about it. We were walking the dogs this morning. He said, if Alan could change one rule in basketball, what would be the one rule that Alan would want to see changed?
Wow. One rule. Man, he may have stumped me on that. What I can say, if we're going to especially look at the NBA,
Yeah.
the rules overall have changed significantly from when I was his age
Yes.
to now, especially with the way defenses are allowed to play, with the
Mhm.
physicality, and I think today's day and age, the NBA is such a money making behemoth, and people tend to pay to watch offense and they pay
Yep.
to watch points on the board.
Yep.
Almost every rule has been tweaked to give the offensive player the advantage so that
Yes.
more points are scored.
Yep.
Um, but I'm kind of old school. I
Yes.
kind of liked some of that pre 80s and 90s basketball where it was a little more physical. So I guess if I had to pick, and that is such an awesome question, I'll be thinking about this for the rest of the day. I would probably skew towards going back to some of those old school rules, that allowed for more physicality, that really allowed more emphasis on defense. But that's, I'm just a product of the age and the environment in which I grew up. And I grew up watching, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and Michael Jordan in their prime.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of biased to liking the way the game was then.
Yes.
The other thing is because of Stephen Curry, I think singularly we can point at him. The game has gotten to the point where you either shoot layups or you shoot threes,
Yeah.
nothing in between. And as a basketball purist and
Yeah.
someone who still attempts to play to this day, there's something very beautiful about the mid-range game
That's
and
right.
being able to take one dribble and shoot a pull-up. And we
Yeah.
just don't see that much anymore because the analytics have proven statistically that that's not the best shot to take. So once again, if we could get back to some of that, I think it was a beautiful game. But I'm not a current hater by any means. I
Yeah.
love the game today. I love the players today. I think what they do is absolutely remarkable.
Yeah.
But the purist in me would probably skew towards taking it back to the 90s.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Alan. Thank you on so many levels. Like,
Of
thank you
course.
for your gift of time, the generous sharing of your expertise, and just also your perspective, your energy. And you are again just such a shining example of the power of alignment, of the power of clarity, of alignment, living your truth, showing up each day. And Alan, again, I wish that we can get you back on the episode for another episode in the future. And again, just thank you so very much. And in our show notes, we'll put all the information on how people could get a hold of you because your podcast is great, your books are phenomenal, and if this we just got a little dose of Alan, I want people to get like a full serving. So we'll make sure people have all of that information. So thank you. Take good care of you and that beautiful set of family that you have, and I wish you all the best. So thanks again, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for spending time with this podcast episode today. I hope you found something helpful in Resiliency Redefined. Please feel free to share it with somebody who you might think could benefit. Maybe there was something useful, something in particular that you think you could pay forward. Also, if you have a moment, please feel free to rate and review this podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcast. It means the world to me. And again, thanks for your time. Thank you for your interest. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.